The air in my dadi's kitchen didn't just smell like vanilla, it smelled like expectations. I was about 10 years old, standing on a step stool, my chin barely clearing the counter, watching her wrist move in a slow and hypnotic arc. She'd never measure her ingredients, not once. She'd pour in the flour and read the cloud it made. I'd ask her, Dadi, how do you know how much to put in? She didn't even look up. The kitchen tells you, she said, but only if you stop talking long enough to hear it. That day, she handed me the wooden spoon. Turn the batter, she whispered. But she paused, wiping her hands on her dupatta and looking at me as she looked at everything, as though she was reading something beneath the surface. The batter turns you too. At 10, I thought baking was simple, ingredients in, cake out, but I didn't realize then that I was standing in the most important classroom of my life. So before I go any further, I would like to ask you all a question, so I'd love to see a show of hands. How many of you here have ever wanted something to really just work, a relationship, an outcome, a version of yourself, before you've actually done the work to get there? Yeah, every single hand here, including mine. That feeling, that's what I like to call the batter. In the beginning, it's lumpy, it's resistant, it doesn't want to become what it's meant to be. And the instinct every time is to want it to be perfect, before want it to be smooth before actually putting the work for it, to want the outcome before the process. And we constantly do this in our own lives. We want the confidence before the attempt. We want the clarity before the commitment. We want the cake fully risen, perfectly golden, without ever standing at the bowl, with flour on your hands and a whisk that keeps catching on lumps. But here's what baking's taught me, and that I've spent the last 7 years slowly understanding, is that growth doesn't come without the resistance. It happens because of it. Like oil and water, two things that don't mix at all, they finally become one, through one thing only: the patient and unrelenting movement of the hand. The lesson? We don't overcome our struggles. We integrate them. We stir them in until they aren't obstacles anymore. They're mere ingredients. My dadi, she was strict in the kitchen. She'd never let me cut corners. She'd say, एक ही direction में whisk करना, नहीं तो bubbles चले जाएंगे. And bubbles, they're crucial for your cake to rise. Now, at that time, I thought it was about physics. But now I know it's about something entirely different. Those bubbles, those tiny pockets of air you build through patient and directional work, those are your spirit, your why, the thing underneath the thing that keeps you going when the logic runs out. And when things get hard, the temptation is to whisk in 1,000 different directions. But when you do that, when you lose your direction in the chaos, you lose your bubbles. And without that, nothing rises. I too lost my bubbles last year when I tried out for the school band, and I thought I gave it my best shot. But when the results came, I wasn't selected. I want to tell you that I took it gracefully, but that would just be a lie. Instead, I felt like a burnt batch, bitter, and honestly a bit embarrassed. So I went home that day, and I didn't bake, which tells you something because baking is where I go to think. Instead, I just sat there, questioning my abilities. But eventually, I got up, I went to the kitchen, and I started stirring. Because here's what my dadis taught me that I keep having to relearn, is that a burnt batch is not a verdict. It's a variable. It tells you something, that the oven ran too hot, you undermixed, you rushed the preheat. It doesn't tell you that you're not a baker. So the first audition, it wasn't a failure. It was just the preheat. So I waited and I refined, and then when the next opportunity came, I made the band. And if you need more proof on why a burnt batch can become something worth perfecting, let me tell you another story. Now, the first time that I made brownies, they looked like a mushy pile of mud straight out of the ground. But the ironic part was that they tasted quite delicious thanks to the Nutella. But they weren't everything I knew they could be. So I didn't stop there. I didn't accept the messy version just because it was edible. because I wanted that perfect brownie with the crispy top and the fudgy center, and with that specific, unmistakable thing that makes you close your eyes on the first bite. So I tried recipe after recipe and failed in new and creative ways. And then finally, I found the one. And as evidence, some of you in the audience might have even had those brownies. Now, I want to wait here for a moment because I think we rush too fast past the in between the burnt patch and the perfect one. There's a period of time that nobody talks about. The period of time where you don't know if keeping going on is resilience or delusion, where you've chosen a path but have no evidence of it being the right one. That period, that's where everything actually happens. And I've had a few versions of it. When I was 13, I started a fun kids class called Kiddos Fun Time for the age group of 5 to 10. And I did that for 3 consecutive summers. It was real children, real parents, real money, and real responsibility. Parents were trusting me with the things they loved the most, and I was just 13. I constantly made mistakes. There were days spent wondering why I'd taken up something which was far beyond expected from me. But something was happening underneath all that uncertainty. I was stirring consistently in one direction. And who I was building was the person who'd stand here on a stage like this one day and talk to you all without her hand shaking, almost without her hand shaking. Now, the kitchen's taught me one more thing, is that you cannot rush the process. And I learned this one while I was baking bread. So my dadi, she gave me a ball of dough. She told me to cover it with a cloth and put it in a corner and wait for an hour. And I did wait for about 11 minutes. Then I checked it. Then I checked it again. Then I had to check it just one more time just to see if something was happening. Now the third time, she caught me. Every time you lift the cloth, she said, you let the cold in and you undo all the work the dough's trying to do without you. The checking itself was the problem. And I think about that a lot since then, how we undo our own rising by constantly measuring it, and how the most important growth in our lives happens in the quiet, covered, unglamorous waiting. Yet we still keep lifting the cloth. Because we need to realize that some things only rise when you leave them alone long enough so they can become what they're meant to be. And I'm still learning to keep the cloth down. Now, I want to ask you all a question. Not rhetorically, but actually. I want you to think in this exact moment. What is the batter in your life? Not the answer that sounds impressive, not the one that you'd give to a teacher, but the thing that feels truly resistant. I don't want you to say it out loud. Just hold it. Maybe your arms are tired of the stir. Maybe you were handed a bowl that you didn't want and said, this is your recipe now. I know that feeling. I know it in my hands. Because here's what I want you to hold on to. Not as a motivational poster, but as something true that I've witnessed in my own kitchen, with my own failures and with real flour in my hands, is that you do not need a tectonic shift. You don't need to burn the kitchen down and start from scratch. You don't need to become someone unrecognizable. You just need a small change in the direction of your hand. My dadi always said that we are the chefs of our own perspectives, not the chefs of our circumstances, not the chefs of the ingredients life throws at us, but the chefs of what we do with them. How we hold the spoon, what bowl we choose, whether we walk away from the bowl, or we stay there stirring until the batter becomes something worth baking. Now, the last time I baked with Dadi, I didn't need that step stool anymore. It was the same spoon, the same bowl, the same kitchen counter. She looked at me and said, your batter looks different than mine. I thought I made a mistake, so I started explaining myself. But she stopped me. Different doesn't mean it's wrong, beta. Different just means that you've become the baker, not the recipe. Today, baking is my way of showing love. There's something quietly profound about taking simple ingredients and turning them into something you can give to someone. Something warm. Something that says, I thought about you while making this. I'm 17, I have ambitions, I have a playlist for every mood, and flour in my hair more often is probably appropriate. And I don't have the perfect recipe. And I don't think I ever will. And I've stopped thinking that it's the problem. Because here's what nobody tells you about baking before you begin is that the recipe was never the point. The point was who you become in the making of it. Through the burn patches and the breakthroughs, the 11 minutes of patience, and the moment you finally stop lifting the cloth. You need to realize that you already have everything in your bowl. You just haven't stirred long enough to see its magic. So the next time life gets heavy, don't walk away from the bowl. Turn the turn and let the turn make you. Thank you.